The first thing that I want to talk about is the transition between half guard and close guard for the person on top. We work repeatedly in a lot of my technique videos hitting that underhook, and I drilled into my students that the underhook is a good thing from half guard to top. The problem is when the person has good hip movement on the bottom and you miss that bottom leg, they start to get back in. When they get back in, it's time to posture. So let's look at that. I went to get my underhook, and in this transition where I was doing really well, I started to flatten him out, but he brought this knee in. It's a very common transition, and they go back to close guard. When they go back to close guard, I see a lot of people continuing to put that pressure. This isn't the right thing now. Posture is what you need to do in close guard. With my head down, it opens me up to cross collar chokes, omoplatas, triangles, arm bars, all that nasty stuff. So when I realize that I'm losing this position and that knee starts to come in, it's time to make posture and come back up. No one ever really says it, okay? We don't really talk about that transition. We talk about it as the person on bottom wanting to get back to guard, but for the person on top, it's time to understand that the underhook isn't gonna do us much good from close guard. There are a couple of passes where we use it, but in general, what I see is that people still keep their head on the floor and continuing to try to pass. So one more time, I'm in here, I start to flatten him out, he moved his hips, he came in, I can't stay down here. Back in, nice space immediately. And if you can't do that because they're overhooking, you need to at least try. Try to make that space. The next thing, transition between closed guard and open guard. I touch on this a little bit in the push-pull sweep, and that's important, but I want it to be its own video. I want to make sure that I never let CJ break open my guard. You don't ever want anyone to break open your guard. You need to be the person that is dictating the pace and where the match goes. If the person is good enough to get to their feet, there are very few options for you to maintain a closed guard. You should have opened your guard when they made that transition to standing. Doing moves in transitions is the easiest way to make sure that it happens. So let's look at that, okay? So I'm in closed guard, and CJ's good. I tried to break his posture, but he got to standing. When he gets to standing, you know, I've got lumberjack sweeps, but in general, my options are limited. It's starting to put a lot of pressure onto my ankles, and that's bad. If I open my legs here, he's already got me crunched up. Back down. So what I want to do is I want to make a transition to open guard while he's standing up. It's important which leg I step, all right? If he steps with his outside leg first, go ahead, stop. I need to make sure that I'm making space with my inside foot. If I try to use this leg, it gets pinched between his thigh and his rib cage. That's bad, okay? So when he starts to do this, I put the other foot on the hip. If he continues to stand up, I make a little bit of space. Back down. So again, in that transition, he comes up, outside foot, inside foot, little bit of space. Good. So I always want to dictate when we transition from closed guard to open guard. Don't let your opponent dictate that. If they dictate that, then that means that they're attacking, you're defending. If you're following, especially in guard passing, you're going to be late to the table, okay? Next, and this doesn't require a partner, but I see it a lot. Let's talk about foot placement and how we should posture and guard. There are a lot of different ways to posture, whether you're down on your feet or you're up on your toes, okay? Different schools, different passes, all of these are going to be dictated here. But what I want to talk about is foot placement. Now, you can see that my feet are in a triangle. There are a couple of reasons that we do that. Triangle is a very strong shape, very good posture, good balance, good base. But where the triangle is weak back here, people get hip bumped and they fall over. And so what I see is people compensate for that by taking their toes outside of their knees. And if you look from the front, right here. And I see a lot of wrestlers, people that have done a lot of active punching from MMA, they like to have their feet outside their knees. The problem with this is when somebody does hip bump you, you probably get 20-25% extra base, the ability to push forward and make it difficult to go over. But in the event that they do overpower you, it forces you into that hurdler stretch. And if you can't lay your back on the floor here, then you're going to injure your knee. When further your heel is out from your knee, the easier it is to put pressure on your knee and tear up your knee. So it's important, even though we get less balance and base to have back here, all right, that we keep them close together because it protects our knees. Now, you might not want to get swept. And I agree with that. I want increased base. But we don't adjust for that by bringing our heels out. We adjust for that by pushing with the pelvis, Mr. CJ. So in the event that Mr. CJ wants to come up and hip bump me, my answer isn't to drive forward with my shoulder. That's what a lot of people do. When he comes up, I'm going to push forward with my pelvis. And you see how it actually disengaged his hips. That's where we counter, by pushing with the belly button, not by pushing with the shoulder. Pushing with the shoulder breaks our own posture. So people, a lot of times, will use that hip bump to come up just to break your posture back down, just to make you base. So protect your knees by keeping your knees on the inside, protect your knees by keeping your ankles on the inside in a good triangle and not outside. Compensate for that loss in base by pushing with your pelvis rather than trying to bow your ankles or push forward with your shoulder. All right, next thing, posture. Posture in open guard, very important. A lot of different ways to do this. There are passes where you naturally break your posture, but it should not be your default position, Mr. CJ. So Mr. CJ is in an open guard. I see a lot of people coming in here. This is bad posture, and the way that you can check is to see if your nose is in front of your toes. If your nose is in front of your toes, your posture's bad. Now, like I said, there are passes that include bringing your nose past your toes, but they don't initiate from that position. You need to have a good balance, a staggered base, one foot in front of the other, not square because I'm not strong in this plane, okay? One in front of the other, and you can see my nose is actually behind my knee. That's actually the best. Now, if I want to do a knee cut pass where my nose does go in front of my toes, I'll step, and then it's the initiation of the pass that I allow that to happen. It can't be the default position. If it's the default position and my nose is in front, and he grabs a hold of a collar, the first thing that's going to hit the floor is my hands or my face. That's bad, okay? If I have balance and posture and he controls and pulls, the first thing that'll hit the floor is my knees. We want my knees to be the first thing to hit the floor because then it allows me to pop back up, but it also allows me control with my hands. If he pulls forward with the collar drag and my knee hits the floor, it still allows me to get an underhook. Whereas if I'm too far forward, even with my hands doing the right thing, the first thing that hits the floor is my hands. So remember in all of your passing, when you're starting to pass, that your nose needs to be behind your toes. Once you initiate a pass, it can come in, or you would attempt to pass, but your default position should have a straight back, low bottom. The reason that most people don't do it is it's tiring on the legs. Time to get in the gym, squat, practice, good counter pressure, it will get easier with time. The last thing I want to look at is the bridge. Bridge is a fantastic move. It's something that we work on every day in class, but a lot of people use it as an all or nothing. Like you lift your hips or they're not lifted. There's a range in there, okay? A lot of people use it as the explosive work part of the UPA escape, the T-Rex escape, some of those other things that I've shown, and it is. But that's not the only place where you use it. What a lot of white belts and blue belts don't understand is that lifting the hips can be a setup for a lot of the other things that you want to do. We have a whole side control series called the Active Bridge. You'll see it more in there. But in general, when I get to the UPA position, I bridge not to roll them over. I bridge so that they put their hands on the floor. And that's just one unique example, but we'll use it a lot. So Mr. CJ is in mount, and he's got posture. So I see a lot of people, they want to trap the arm, but they can't, okay? Again, this is just one example. If I bridge and I keep my hips up, eventually his hands will go to the floor. If they don't, he has to really activate his core to keep his shoulders back, okay? Then, hands to the floor. Now, I control, now I'll turn. And so that active bridge just means that I'm keeping my hips up, but more importantly, I want it to challenge the base or make space. So the bridge can be used to roll people over. It can be used to make space underneath the back. It can be used to make people readjust their balance. And when they're readjusting their balance, they're putting their hands on the floor, they're not actively attacking you. And that's a really important concept. So active bridge, make sure you keep those hips up.